Hi, it's Marianne Clyde, and my guest today is Jennifer Goldman. She's the president of Resonance LLC. She helps people create a corporate culture that they want to have. So Jen, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we've all been involved with companies that have had different corporate cultures. You can probably, I think like you even said, you can kind of walk in the front door and feel the corporate culture.
Okay.
It might be really, really tense because the CEO's always flying off the handle, or it might be really, really relaxed and everybody's in blue jeans and maybe a bit too relaxed, so not enough gets done. But you can actually feel it when you talk to the people, when you walk in the front door.
Corporations are like people. They have their own personalities, really, and it's made up of all the individuals who are in it and how they interact, really.
Well, that's key, because whatever corporate culture you have, you're going to attract more of that.
Correct.
So you're going to attract people that are like that culture. If they're reactive and abusive and snippy and removed or whatever, you're going to attract more employees like that. So, okay, so I guess I got several questions for you.
All right.
So, how does one assess if their corporate culture is the corporate culture that they themselves feel comfortable with?
And sometimes the people at the top don't recognize it. You know, they may not love being in that company anymore. They may not really enjoy the people that they're working with, but they've gotten so used to it that they just don't recognize it as a negative environment. So sometimes it's good to have a healthy, brand new, fresh set of eyes. You know, and as customers, as consumers, we see this all the time. As we walk into a place of business, you can feel it. You know, are people being attentive? Are you, being cared for as a customer? Are you being ignored? Or, you know, do you hear the coworkers in the background snipping about their bosses or their job? So as outsiders, it's so easy to see, but when you're in it, sometimes you just can't. So it's always good to have that outside set of eyes, to bring in a consultant, or to even just ask a family friend, a neighbor, you know what, can you just wander into my office one day and walk around, and, nobody's really going to question you as the boss. Sometimes when they see you, they brighten up and they, do exactly what they're supposed to, even if they don't when you're not there.
Right. Whether you're the owner of a hardware store, or a winery, or a big corporation, or CEO of a big corporation, they all have their cultures.
Yes, and they're all very unique.
So, okay, so what if you're starting to get some feedback, or you yourself think, this isn't comfortable. My interactions with my employees aren't comfortable, or they're acting sort of fearful, or whatever it is, or they're acting slovenly, or slothfully.
Yes, the 7 deadly sins should not apply in your company.
Right.
You don't want that.
So what are some signs they might see that their corporate culture's not working?
You'll probably be fielding complaints from employees who are complaining about other employees.
Okay.
Sort of the tattletale syndrome, that they're not really getting along. Or you'll see them possibly banding together, what you call the water cooler gossip. Where they're all standing around, but it's really just complaining. Your turnover rate will either be very, very low and stagnant, or very, very high. A decent turnover rate is actually optimal.
Okay.
When it's zero, then people are sort of stagnant and complacent, and nobody's really looking to move or improve.
Okay.
But when it's too high, people are, they're coming and going for some reason. Whether it's because they came and they got a better offer somewhere else, or they came and they didn't like it. High turnover is just as bad as too low of a turnover. The facility, what does it look like? Is it a bright, fresh environment, or, does it sort of make you cringe when you pull up into the parking lot or walk in the door? Those are all signs.
The dark hallways, the crumbling paint.
You want a culture that, empowers the employees, and is fulfilling to them, that they care enough to make their environment a good place to work.
So it should be a change from the top down, I would think.
It's easier that way.
Right, and probably more effective.
Yes.
But like you said, sometimes at the top we get kind of stagnant.
Right.
So if we're talking to leaders here, not necessarily a CEO, not necessarily a manager, could be an entrepreneur, could be a mid-level manager.
Right.
We're all leaders in some way. So what if somebody notices there is a need
Right.
for corporate culture change?
I know.
What
and
should
it's-
they do? And they're not the top guy.
Yeah, it's harder at the bottom because there's a little more fear involved. You know, will I be able to keep my job? Are people listening? But it isn't impossible. And hopefully there's somebody who is above you or has a little more power than you that you could talk to and say, you know, could we implement something like this? And I always advise people, come with a solution, not just a problem.
Great idea.
And you hear that a lot.
Yes,
but
great
it is
idea.
so true because when I come to you and I complain,
Rag, rag, rag.
all you hear is, oh, she's not happy.
Right.
She might be part of the problem.
Right.
But if I say, you know, I see this happening and it makes me want to come here every morning a little bit less.
Yeah.
And I think if we did this, it would really help. At least it would help me. It probably would help others.
So be prepared if you have a complaint
Right.
to have a solution and be willing to be part of that solution.
Exactly. Be the
Don't say
change.
anything, right? Don't say anything if you're not going to be head of the committee. Right?
Yes. When you open your mouth, you need to be prepared for some of the responsibility.
Right. But then that elevates you in
Right.
the
And it's empowering.
company. Yeah, it's very empowering.
It is, yes, and know who you're talking to as well. That helps. If you know that you're talking to a very analytical, data-driven type of person, bring some numbers with you. Do a little research.
Good suggestion.
In
Yeah.
26% of companies, they have found that when this is present in the environment, satisfaction rates improve. So,
So
something like
statistics
that.
is helpful if you're going to.
It is.
So prove it's not just a feeling. It's not
Right.
woo-woo.
I know.
It's proof that it will help productivity because the Zentivity culture is all about creating a strong centeredness so you can improve productivity and you can increase your income and the company's bottom line. I mean, that,
It's all tied together.
yeah,
It
it's
really is.
very much tied together. So be prepared to help.
Yes.
Be prepared with a suggestion.
Yes.
So what if you make your suggestion and it falls flat?
Well, that also speaks to the culture. And unfortunately, as an employee, then at that point, you have to decide if things aren't going to get better. You can do small things yourself just to see if it makes, if you know it's a coworker's birthday, you might bring in a cake, and invite everybody else to come, like at 4:55, where we're almost out of work, almost
light
done
the
for the day.
candles.
So we're
Yeah.
not really taking company time. Let's get together and wish this person a happy birthday. And, that's a small thing that as an employee, I don't think anybody's really going to get upset with you for,
But it's a self-appointed position that
Right.
you can create. Even if somebody else says, no, we're not recognizing people's birthdays, you can.
Right. And you can always try it once. I don't
Right.
think anybody's really going to get upset about that. You may have somebody say, I would really rather you waited till 5 o'clock to do that.
Right.
And hopefully not. But as an employee, you have to gauge that for yourself. Is
Right.
this a culture that you're comfortable with? And that speaks again to that turnover rate. And hopefully bosses get enough feedback. It's one of the things that I always believe in is always speak your mind. Filter, be kind and considerate about it.
Sure.
But if the people at the top never hear any of these suggestions or complaints or ideas, they might not know why people keep leaving. So if your boss isn't going to listen or change anything, at least maybe enough people say the same things that at some point they want to change things.
Right. Right. So if you want to add a yoga class or you think that's a great
Right.
idea to bring in a trainer or something like that, to ask somebody, have somebody maybe even in mind and
Right.
and say, we can start this, it only is going to cost this much.
And there are so many creative ways that you can make changes. It could be as simple as asking 5 other coworkers, I'm going to go walk at lunchtime. Do you want to come with me? Because then you get to know those people a little bit better. You're doing something together. It is not company time. It is your lunch break. It's your own time. And maybe that group just keeps going every day, or you pick once a week. And before you know it, 20 people are walking together. And,
Right.
it has nothing to do with the bosses or what they will or won't allow. It's just a way to engage with each other.
Engage yourselves, even if the
Yes.
corporate culture is not going to engage
Yeah,
you.
so there are ways. You don't have to be at the top in order to make change.
So sometimes a corporate culture allows certain personalities to sort of become bigger than they need to be. For example, a toxic personality at any level
Right.
It can be at the top, it can be in the middle, it can be at the bottom, it can be anywhere on the corporate scale, and it's deadly.
It is. It's not good for anybody.
So what you have a list sort of a solutions where
We
there
had to
is
drop
a
the dead
point.
weight.
Yeah, where you
really do.
have to make some decisions.
And it takes a certain amount of, well, I guess what my father would call chutzpah, to do that. You have to be able to look at your employees and understand that. And somebody said this the other day, and I don't remember where I heard it. I wish I did. But the toxic person who can do their job magnificently, they can sell anything, they can do anything, they are just incredibly productive. But they have a toxic personality. In the end, they've offered your company nothing. It really is a detriment. And so you have to be able to look at that and go, you know what? Maybe you can offer some sort of training or counseling to that person. But ultimately, you just can't have that environment. You're going to bring everybody down.
So you'd have to document. I mean, you have to have a reason.
We still have to be an employer who is, following and abiding by all of the rules and laws.
Right. So anybody who complains, you just make a note, put it in their file, that kind of thing. But offering some sort of counseling or something like that, it's the same. Right. A toxic personality can be an angry person with unresolved issues. It can be a narcissistic personality. It can be a borderline personality, or it can just be somebody with I don't give a darn sort of
And sometimes
approach.
There are people who are toxic in your environment because ultimately they're really just unhappy there. They're unhappy with their job. They're unhappy with what they're doing. It could be some outside thing. And losing that job sometimes is a catalyst for them, and they move on and they find something that makes them happy, and they're not toxic in the next environment. And so sometimes those situations help everybody.
Or even spending time with that person and you find out it's this position I'm not suited for, but this position I am.
And I like doing that. I like
where they
mixing
bloom.
things up, and it's like, okay, but if I put this person over here, what happens?
Right.
And sometimes that's the best solution, because I think a lot of times people get stuck too in, I graduated with this degree, so I should do this type of job.
Right.
But this is the job that makes them really happy.
I really want to do this. Yeah.
And sometimes it's just recognizing that. You know what? I know you're really good at this because you have the education, the background here. But what if we spent, half of a day every week? You take on this role, this responsibility. So sometimes sort of letting them test the waters, get their feet wet a little bit in a different role. People will come to life.
Yeah, mixing it up really does help. And it enlivens people, too. It makes you a little more creative, makes you a little more engaged because you're learning something new about a different part of the business and so forth. So, so yes, maybe we have to identify and move or get rid of toxic.
And there are some companies where they do that, where they automatically, everybody has to learn all the different roles in the company. Whether, you are ultimately going to do this job, you need to know what all of the other positions here are so you have a more comprehensive feel for what this business does. And I think that's a great thing. And I've heard people call it something like, not siloing your employees so that, if all of a sudden this person is gone, anyone else could, at least step in and fulfill that role until a new person is hired.
At least they know what's going on in that department.
Exactly. There's no, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And I did that right. Okay. I always have to look. But it is also a great way to find out what other skills people have that they may not know.
Good point. Okay, so besides getting rid of people or moving people around, are there any other turning points, sort of
pivot strategies is what I call that.
Okay.
And it's great, especially if you can get people at least somewhere along the top to recognize that something needs to change or improve. And it might not be that it's bad. It's just that we want things to be better.
Yeah.
Really, you can bring in an outside consultant who can, have everybody in one room with just an open policy where, it doesn't matter what you're going to complain about, and nobody's going to hold it against you if it's the type of culture that can withstand that.
Yes.
If too many people are going to have too many hurt feelings and people are going to get fired tomorrow because somebody was honest, you can't do that.
Right.
And you can always bring in somebody who, meets with everybody individually, and everything is anonymously said. But that person can also take an unbiased look and make a report. Okay. This is what I see. These are some suggestions for, some of the problems that are being presented here.
Mm-hmm.
Another good idea is to bring in that person as sort of an analyst to do a SWOT analysis.
Mm-hmm. Meaning what?
Meaning your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the company. And in talking to everybody in the company, then you can start to get a look at, these are the things that we do really, really well.
Yeah.
These are the things that, sort of threaten our culture.
Okay.
And you identify it more specifically so that you can see which things do we want to improve on, which things do we want to do more of because we're good at it, it makes people feel good. Which of the negative things do we need to get rid of or change immediately? And what are some opportunities, things that we're not doing, things that we could implement? It's a good way to take a nice unbiased evaluation.
Right.
That isn't coming, from the employees or from the top. It's coming from an outside source that says, I see these as some of your challenges.
Which is often more effective.
Right.
Because you've got a third party saying it instead of one-on-one, like you're the problem.
Right.
That kind of thing. So
yes. It
so
creates
those
a
are
little
great
less
suggestions.
animosity.
Right. So if you had to give us 1 point, I know that's hard.
On the spot.
Or maybe a top 3 things that a leader, anywhere in the business, anywhere in your workplace culture, you're a leader because you recognize things. You want to grow, you want to learn, you want to thrive, you want to increase your productivity, and you want to maintain your groundedness. So you're a leader. What are 1, 2, or 3 things that leader can do to recognize and change a corporate culture?
I think the best and easiest thing really is to just have conversation. Have more one-on-one time with other people, whether you are the top person or the bottom person, because if you're at the bottom, it always helps you to know the person at the top.
Right.
And, all the people along the way, because when you want to grow and do new things, you want people to be receptive to you. You want them to trust you. You want them to like you. So have those conversations. If you're at the top, you want all of your people to recognize who you are, to trust you, to respect you. You don't want them to be scared of you or not know who you are. So just engaging more, having more conversation is one of the simplest, easiest things you can do. And if nothing else, it changes your relationships with people.
And relationships are really what life is all about, whether it's a corporate culture, a personal family life, or workplace success. It's how do you relate to your employee? How do you relate to your client? How do you relate to your customer? How do you relate to your community? How do you relate to the world at large? I mean, it's all relationship based. So those little showing interest in other people, I think, is great advice.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us today. I appreciate
welcome.
that. So there you have it. It's all about the relationship. As many other things as you can do to change your corporate culture, it can start with you and the relationships that you create in your workplace environment. Thanks to Jennifer Goodman for joining us from Resonance LLC. And thank you for joining us today.